I was never good enough for them, but when I walked away, why did life finally start loving me back? The weight of being inadequate is a quiet kind of violence, leaving you perpetually seeking an approval that never comes. I'm Leo, 35, and for 25 years, my identity was shaped by the constant, crushing knowledge that I simply was not enough. My family was a carefully curated image of conventional success and rigid perfection. My parents, Victor, 60, and George, 62, were pillars of the local medical community, precise, demanding, and utterly devoted to external appearances. My older brother, Daniel, 38, was their masterpiece, a brilliant surgeon, effortlessly successful, married to a corporate executive, and father to 2 perfect children. I was the exception, the variable that refused to be controlled. I struggled academically, not from lack of effort, but from a pervasive anxiety that locked up my mind during tests. I chose art over science, creativity over predictability, and quiet observation over social performance. This was my central problem. I didn't fit the mold. And because I didn't fit the mold, I was deemed perpetually in need of improvement. Every family gathering was an unspoken performance review. My father, George, would ask pointed, discouraging questions about my freelance graphic design income, framing it as a cute hobby, rather than a career. My mother, Victoria, would sigh dramatically whenever my messy apartment or unconventional wardrobe came up, implying that my disorganization was a moral failure. Daniel was the most subtle but most effective tormentor. His pity was absolute. He didn't criticize my work. He pitied my struggle, constantly offering to talk to people in his network to find me a real job, or advising me to be more practical. His perfection was a constant, blinding reminder of my deficiency. The devastating life lesson I absorbed was this: my inherent value was conditional upon my ability to achieve a rigid, external standard that was fundamentally incompatible with my nature. I spent my 20s trying to be a pale imitation of what they wanted, shrinking myself until I was barely visible. I tried to please them. I spent 3 years pursuing a degree in business administration, miserable and failing. I dated women they approved of, boring women who talked about stocks and property deeds. I tried to keep my apartment spotless, suppressing my natural artistic chaos. All of it failed. The more I tried to conform, the more anxious and miserable I became, which only fueled their critique. They saw my struggles as proof of their initial assessment, that I lacked the necessary discipline and drive. They couldn't see the immense effort I was expending simply to breathe under the weight of their judgment. The constant striving for an unreachable standard left me emotionally and physically exhausted. I was 30 years old, suffering from chronic stress headaches, and unable to produce creative work of any kind. I was entirely consumed by the narrative of my own inadequacy. I remember one Christmas dinner where Daniel lamented my decision to turn down a low-paying office job. "It's just that we worry, Leo," he said, his voice dripping with concern. "You need stability. You need to be set." I looked at my family, all set, all successful, yet all seemingly stressed and cold, and a chilling thought struck me. They didn't want me to be happy. They wanted me to be predictable, because my unpredictability challenged their perfect structure. If you realized the people who judged you weren't concerned with your happiness, but with maintaining their image, would you choose to stay and fight, or simply disappear? My moment of decision was not dramatic, it was quiet and absolute. I was looking at my latest design project, which I hated because I designed it to be practical and marketable, not because I loved it. I realized the stifling weight was internal. I was carrying their disappointment everywhere. I made the decision to walk away entirely. I didn't announce a massive life change, I simply executed a tactical retreat. I sold my possessions, paid off my tiny debt, and bought a one-way ticket to a small coastal town on the other side of the country. I didn't leave a note. I sent a simple, terse email to my family, informing them I was moving and needed space. I changed my number. For the first 6 months, I was a wreck. The internalized voices of Victoria and George haunted me constantly, telling me I was reckless, irresponsible, and would soon fail and come crawling back. I had to consciously, painfully, silence them every single day. I found a tiny, sunny apartment overlooking the harbor. I got a low-stress job working as a curator for a local maritime museum, organizing archives, a role that utilized my meticulous side but was far removed from the high-pressure world of corporate design. The air was different. The people were different. Here, my quiet nature was seen as thoughtful, not withdrawn. My artistic eye was appreciated in the details of the historical exhibits. No one cared about my rent or my marriage status. They only cared if I did my job well and if I was kind. The most astonishing change was the return of my creativity. Freed from the burden of designing for approval, I began to draw and paint purely for joy. I didn't worry about markets or practicality. I painted the intense, chaotic beauty of the ocean, the worn wood of the boats, the deep textures of the local history. My art was messy, flawed, and absolutely vital. And then, the grace started. A local gallery owner, Alara, 55, saw my sketches at the museum and was captivated. She didn't ask about my qualifications or my career history, she asked about the feeling behind the lines. She offered me a small show. The show was successful, not in a massive, financial way, but in a profound, validating way. People connected deeply with the raw emotion in my work. They saw me, and they loved what they saw. This was the first time in my life that external validation felt earned, clean, and real. It wasn't conditional on an external standard, it was a response to my authentic self. The life started loving me back in small, miraculous ways. My chronic headaches disappeared. I fell in love with a kind, steady local shipwright, Ben, 36, who saw my quiet intensity as my greatest strength. He never tried to fix me, he simply adored me exactly as I was. I realized the critical lesson. My family hadn't been blocking my success, they had been blocking my happiness. Happiness was incompatible with their need for control. When I removed myself from their orbit, the natural, positive flow of life, the jobs, the love, the peace, finally reached me. 5 years passed in total peace. I had achieved a level of emotional and professional fulfillment I never thought possible. My parents and Daniel had occasionally tried to contact me, mostly through curt emails or messages to mutual friends, but I maintained the boundary, replying only with brief, non-committal updates. Then, the storm broke in their world. George, my father, suffered a massive health scare that forced him into early retirement. The sudden loss of his professional identity triggered a huge emotional crisis for him and my mother, Victoria. Their perfect, controlled world was destabilized. Daniel was caught in the middle, trying to manage his demanding career, his family, and his parents' escalating needs. He, the perfect one, was finally overwhelmed. The calls started again, but this time, they were different. They weren't critical, they were needy. Daniel called, his voice strained and tight with exhaustion, asking not for money or advice, but for emotional labor. He wanted to know how I was, so calm, and so happy. He wanted me to fly back, not to be fixed, but to fix them. My mother, Victoria, sent me a handwritten letter, a true shock, filled with vague, generalized apologies about not always seeing things clearly, and praising my resilience. But the core message was clear: they needed my stability, the quiet strength I had built in isolation. The irony was immense. The resilience they had once criticized as stubborn resistance was now the only thing they trusted to save their collapsing emotional structure. They needed my light, but they hadn't realized that light was built from the darkness they created. If the family who broke you finally reached out, not to apologize, but to ask for your emotional resources to fix their own broken lives, what would you give them? I finally agreed to meet Daniel, but on neutral ground, in a city halfway between us. I did it not to reconnect, but to understand the closure I needed. When he walked in, the change was startling. The surgical precision in his eyes was gone, replaced by deep fatigue. He looked, for the first time, like a deeply flawed human being. He spoke for an hour, detailing the relentless demands of his life and the chaos of managing our parents. He never apologized for the past. He only offered praise for the present. You have such peace, Leo. How did you do it? You're thriving. You're loved. I listened, quietly accepting his transactional praise. I realized that he genuinely couldn't apologize because he didn't view their past actions as cruelty. He viewed them as necessary guidance that, ironically, failed. His pity was absolute, even now. He saw my current happiness not as a triumph of freedom, but as a successful outcome of his previous concern. I explained my life in simple terms, that I left because I couldn't be happy while trying to be someone else. I told him I found peace when I stopped seeking their approval and started listening to my own voice. I looked at him, and the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Their love was conditional on my submission, but their peace was conditional on my success. They didn't love me in the past. They loved the idea of fixing me. They didn't love me now. They loved the reflection of my stability on their family name. I offered Daniel empathy for his current exhaustion, but not rescue. I told him the only way to find peace was to set his own boundaries, something I learned from the isolation she helped enforce. I gave him the truth, not the emotional labor he craved. I returned to my coastal town, whole and unburdened. I had given my family closure, but I had maintained my boundaries. I continued to send them brief, kind updates, but I keep the distance. I realized that my life loving me back was not a mysterious reward from the universe, it was a simple consequence of self-respect. When I stopped sacrificing my authentic self for approval, I created a space where genuine happiness could enter. The joy, the love, the professional success, all of it came because I finally gave myself permission to be imperfect. The ultimate life lesson I carry now is this: you are not responsible for the narrative others write about you. Your only job is to live a life so authentic that the plot they wrote becomes obsolete. My journey was painful, but it led me to an unshakable truth. I was never good enough for them, but I was always good enough for me. And when I accepted that, the world finally agreed. I want to know what you think. If you found ultimate peace only after leaving a judgmental family behind, would you offer them emotional resources to help them cope with their own crises, or would you maintain your distance to preserve the peace you fought so hard to achieve? Let me know your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.